My name is Lisa Weil. I'm the Policy Director of Great Education Colorado, and I will try not to use too much of my time and move right on to the testimony. Great Education Colorado is a statewide grassroots, nonpartisan organization that advocates for improved public education, specifically through wise and increased investment in our schools, colleges, and universities. I'm also here representing Great Ed as part of the Great Futures Colorado campaign, and growing and diverse coalition of organizations that are joining forces to advocate for budget reform and better investment in the next generation. You'll be hearing from other members of the coalition as the afternoon unfolds. And finally, I'm here as a public school parent of a son with 32 kids in his 6th grade language and math classes at a school that asks parents to donate $3 per day of school in order to help provide critical resources and plug budget holes. This organization, Great Ed, has been fighting for better investment in our schools for almost 7 years. Long before this downturn, we were making presentations around the state, focusing on Colorado's failure to provide the level of resources necessary to prepare all Colorado kids for the challenges of the 21st century economy. Now, with the Chairman's permission, I would like to distribute a graph showing Colorado's trajectory per pupil spending. Many of you have probably seen this already. And some people in the audience are actually wearing it on their back. So this graph shows Colorado's trajectory of per pupil spending compared to the national average over the past 30 years. And the final data point on that graph represents the most recent compiled data from 2007, which, as it turns out, was Colorado's high point in K-12 funding. And back in 2007, Great Ed was already fighting this fight because Colorado was already in the bottom quartile of states in per pupil funding, pupil-teacher ratios, use of technology in schools, teacher pay as compared to pay in similar professions, and several measures of the achievement gap. At that time, it never occurred to us that we would ever be looking at cuts of $500 per pupil, or more than $400 million below the funding levels that are required by Amendment 23. Now, on the other side of that graph is a table indicating where Colorado ranks nationally in state and local per capita contribution to higher education. We are ranked 48th. Takes a while to find us. Be sure to note that the first and second ranked states are our neighbors, Wyoming and New Mexico. These visuals tell the financial story of education funding in Colorado, but the story that really matters is what that downward trend means to our kids and our students. And that's what we'll be hearing testimony about today. The long-term, often irreversible impact of these cuts on our students is what motivated the Great Futures Coalition to decide that inaction is no longer an option. Now, we know that for many of you, voting on this year's School Finance Act was one of the most difficult, unhappy actions you have ever had to take while serving in this body. And we're here today to support HCR 1002, which we call DECIDE, so that next year you won't have to pass another devastating School Finance Act or a long bill that pushes higher ed off the cliff that we all know is coming. Why do we call it DECIDE? It stands for DECIDE. Education cuts, or invest in our democracy and economy. That's the choice that we want the voters to have. We want a chance for Coloradans to decide whether Colorado should continue to slash education funding, or whether instead our state should invest in our children, our schools and colleges, and our economy. But unless DECIDE is on the ballot, the voters will have no choice and no voice. The education cuts will go on whether or not that reflects the values of the voters or your values, for that matter. Our budget is on autopilot. All we are asking is an opportunity to decide our priorities rather than having a budget process that results in cuts to education by default. We call this referred measure DECIDE because it is time to let the voters decide which value is more important to them right now. Maintaining the strictest revenue and spending limits in the country by far, bar none, or investing adequately in our schools, colleges, universities, and children. We simply can't do both. Unless the legislature puts DECIDE on the ballot, the choice between those two values will be made for us once again, and education, our kids, and ultimately our economy will once again be the automatic losers. With DECIDE, the voters would give the legislature the ability to raise revenues to support public education, as well as the ability to wisely make use of the first study of Colorado's tax structure to be conducted in over a half a century. And to those who think that this would be unfettered discretion to raise taxes, I have one word: re-election. The ultimate accountability measure. That's all it's going to do. So make no mistake, the time to act is now. The long-term, perhaps permanent damage that will be done to children, schools, colleges, and universities, and our economy by the 2010-11 budget, much less another round of cuts next year, is unacceptable. Every year we cut will require 2 to 3 years to build back to our already inadequate funding levels of 2007. That's bad for students, it's bad for our institutions of higher education, it's bad for business, it's bad for our economy. Inaction is no longer a feasible, just, or moral option. Please support HCR 1002 and let us decide. Thank you very much.